This poem is the ground I'm searching for. I'm reaching all of my starfish limbs towards something, any kind of purchase. Floating here in a week of talking across rooms I can't touch down. The quiet hive of my chest has grown restless. Its buzzing rises into my ears. What? I keep saying whenever someone speaks. I'm always surprised that others can't hear it, can't see it, my swarm that pulses over me, cartoonish and dark, a menace to anyone's nice day. This poem is the bottle I hold out, sweetened with nectar. I wait for them to catch the scent, funnel in, and go quiet in their secret rooms.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Poets in Montana. Today's guest is Amy Ratto Parks, and you just heard a poem for today, a poem a day, kind of
Yes.
like you get it from the Academy or whatever.
Of course,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
just like that. It's my own poetry academy.
Well,
Yes.
it's good to see you.
You too.
And you know, I one of the things I realized when I was like looking through, you know, stuff of yours, I didn't really see a significant bio in terms of going backwards. So,
Yeah.
where did you come from, and how did you get to Montana, and all that good stuff?
Right. It's been a while, because now we've been in Montana a while. Like many people, I came to Montana for the MFA program in
Okay.
creative writing in 2000. And though I will say we also arrived here, my husband and I, we had just gotten married the spring before and had sort of decided I was going to go to grad school and we couldn't decide where. And I remember my husband just kept pointing out a map of Missoula, and he's like, anywhere you want to go is great, but look at all the rivers that come in right here, and he would just keep pointing to it. So that's partially how we ended up in Missoula, and also like many people thought we wouldn't stay.
Yeah.
And then we did.
Yeah.
So I started out as an MFA in poetry and then added on literature and just kind of stuck
Yeah.
around and kept
And-
teaching.
And you kept teaching at the U.
Yeah, there was a long back and forth where I was a graduate student and then I was an adjunct and then I was still a graduate student and then I took a different job and then I worked on a doctorate and then I took a different job and then a different job. So in one version of the story, we moved here and I started working at UM. And the other version, there are all kinds of like spiky branches off the path.
Like a lot of people.
Yeah, kind of just collecting in writing
Surviving in
experiences.
Montana.
Yes.
Yeah, and your husband's a river guy.
He is, yes. And that, he was working in recreation when we came here and he was working at the ski hill when we moved here. We just kind of were piecing things together. We
Yeah.
used to joke, you know, how hard it is to find full-time work in Missoula.
Right.
That hasn't changed.
Right. I remember, as I was telling you earlier when we first saw each other again here after a long time,
know.
is that I remember meeting you probably 20 years
Yeah.
ago, or maybe a little bit more than 20 years ago, for a poetry reading, because
Yeah.
I had just been introduced to you, and
Yeah.
and your first book came
right
out of
then.
that.
Yeah.
Is that your first book?
Yeah, yes, this is. That was the first one,
and
chapbook.
it's bread and water body, and we found it in the Missoula Library today
did.
because I forgot to bring it.
And so did I.
Yeah. So anyway, I got a chance to read this again, and I just really love this book.
It's telling to me that I somehow decided to put my address in that book, and it was my address in Ohio.
Yeah.
A lot of questionable choices we make early. I was like, what was I thinking? I don't know. But I was like, my home address in Ohio.
Well, that's where you came from.
That's where I came
That
from.
was home. Now home is probably here.
Yeah.
20 years or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, do you want to read us something from here?
Sure. Absolutely.
Right.
It's such a great, it is interesting to think how this was full 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to read the first one because it really has a lot of surprising echoes to the poem I just read that I wrote this morning. This one is called Grounding. Already midsummer and you have been gone too long, untethered, spinning in a fever to gather twigs and twine, to spin a warm place to set a winter baby. You're potting plants, making banana bread. Somehow these things have become urgent. But listen, this child is not a house guest. It is not a bent-kneed soldier waiting for ambush, not a light-bound answer to anything. It has no intention. It blooms without consent, so stand still and let gravity do its work. You can't hear through its ears. You can't see the lurching of blood and skin. It cannot see its own fingers fanning out, doesn't know this as its beginning. So come away from that moment, the stretching skin and hot bellowing red, then new and slipping like a plum from ripe skin. Come back to the sounds in the kitchen below, dry toast sliding across a plate, water on, off, the neighbor's dog, the trains breaking in the rail yard. Come back to the strange brightness of your own weather. Map it again as you have 100 times before and claim it simply. Find your feet touching the ground. They are beautiful for touching the ground.
Grounded.
Yeah.
Nice.
Trying to get back, although I'm glad I'm not having a baby right this minute, but somehow I do still tend to be way up here searching for trying to come back down.
Yeah, and that was, as I mentioned to you, what was so amazing when I went back and read that book again after probably 20 years. I mean, I don't think I've read it since I first got it. And was that you had, you know, it was like, I remember the poet Ed Leahy was a friend of mine, and he wrote a letter to, who was it? Somebody back east, some prestigious poet back east. It was, and anyway, I don't remember who it was off the top of my head. They wrote back and said, because he'd sent him some poems, "You're lucky that you have something to write about."
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting what you just said to me about, this was a Miriam Foundation award-winning book, right?
Yeah.
Before it was a book. You got the award and then you did the book.
Yep.
And well, go ahead and say again what you said.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, it wasn't the plan to, I mean, we wouldn't have planned to decide to have a baby while I was in the middle of graduate school. But we did. We decided, hey, you know, there are worse choices to make, right? This is actually great timing for us. So we're going to go ahead and, for a lot of reasons, I admit I didn't actually think I would get pregnant when I was like, sure. But I did. And so then in the middle of graduate school, I was teaching and being pregnant and having a baby in the middle of winter. And I had a professor who I dearly loved and respected a lot of her commentary, but when I told her that I was pregnant, very happy, told her I was pregnant, she said, "Oh, you're ruined, at least for 10 years, you're ruined." And I was mortified and also completely amused because, you know, as a person who also hadn't had any children, and I had written a lot of these poems, but was really dogged in creating this collection that it then became a book of poems that were really about pregnancy and birth and those first experiences of having a little tiny baby, a little new human that is waiting for you to do everything for it.
Right, right. And the echoes in the book of your father.
Yes, trying to reconcile, still figuring out being a child of somebody else and then also having a child.
Right.
Yeah.
And your father passed away
when I was in middle school.
When you were in middle
yes,
school.
he really shows up still in a lot of poems.
It's kind of a pivotal age.
Yes, 8th grade was definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the illness. So he was sick. He had cancer, and he was sick for all of my 7th grade year, and then died at the beginning of my 8th grade year. And it's funny how we all have these really like big anchoring experiences that seem to kind of color so many other things as we get older, and that the coloring shifts and changes. But I mean, there are some moments where like, really, I can't believe that still affects what I'm thinking about things.
Right.
And now I think it just might always.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty powerful thing to happen at that, particularly at that stage of life, probably.
Yeah.
Do you want to read Vertigo?
Yeah, it's great. It's a good one to pull. That's one of my favorite ones. Vertigo. The kitchen's tilted table leans away from me, and the surface of my tea sinks toward the black rim, close to dripping. If I don't look, I won't feel that I'm floating above the mug, the daily paper, the bits of toast and crumbs. I won't feel as though the magic hands on the tablecloth could whip it all from under. The years I knew my father shrink from this height, and his face in my mind is fading. The memory aging into blurry features, accepting them too well, almost gloating in the growing anonymity. This year he's been gone longer than I knew him. Once my mother told me about being a child in the country, the string of kids stretched by their hands like paper dolls, sprawling away from an electric fence. There was always a new kid on the end, the sucker who didn't know better than to be there. He's the one that felt the shock, fired from the fence and sent across the arms and chests, painless until it reached him, whipping into his hand. From my chair by the table, I can see birds lined on the wires, sweeping down to the mountain ash for the rest of its orange fruit, their feet clutching a branch against the spinning snow. A horizonless sky coated in low stratus lingers, and since I'm here, I know something is holding me, a hand I don't recognize. Maybe it isn't fair to be angry at a man who is so betrayed by his body, but he left something open in me that will never close. What if he had been here all this time? Would I be here in this shop-worn dress, ragged at the knees at the end of a line? Hands out, I know what will come. The calloused skin of my free palm faces the sky.
Nice.
I feel like a little bit like that's just about poems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like it's always a surprise to write something not always comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And we still are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, what's it gonna be
What's
if
next?
I sit here? Yeah, what's gonna land if I put my hand out?
Mm-hmm.
But also I think for me, like, grief is also really just attached to that,
Mm-hmm.
that thing, whatever that thing is that would land.
Yeah. It's the unknown thing, the thing that we can't describe, I think, about life,
Yeah.
death, whatever this is.
Right? That little thing that you can notice for a minute, like maybe long enough to write about, and then you have to just pull back from, otherwise you can't really go through the rest of a day.
Right. Right.
I mean, or sometimes you do and it's just really hard.
And you can't hold on to everything.
No.
So there's a metaphor there too, I guess, of letting
Or
things
so then
go.
we just compulsively document things so that we don't have to hold on to them. I
and
know
put them
that's,
in books on the shelves.
Yeah, that's exactly. I know for me that was always like, I want to hold on to it, so I just write it down, and I'll write this down, and I'll write this down, and then I always trusted that if it was written down, then it was somewhere.
Right.
Like it existed somewhere.
It's another way of fooling ourselves.
Oh, it's all, yeah, right? It's all a way of fooling ourselves.
No.
I don't have to think about it anymore. I wrote it down. But instead, when you look at a whole body of things, you're like, it turns out I'm writing about the same things.
Right.
Still over and over again.
Well, the other one in there that the sort of birthing poem,
Yeah.
that long aligning or whatever. What was the title of that
Is
poem?
the
That
title.
there's a long poem in there that
About actually having a baby. Oh, arriving.
arriving.
Oh, right? That's
aligning,
just
arriving.
almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to read that?
It's just a really long one.
Well,
Good.
that's. I mean, it's a journey.
I'll read it. Yeah.
Okay.
This is a great. I have a sister right now who is pregnant, so I'll read this for Emily since she's pregnant. She's doing a little bit. I haven't read this in a long time. No promises I'll make this through without like the emotional pause. All right, so this is a poem that I wrote in trying to figure out, process the experience of actually just delivering my daughter. So I had her at home, which makes the scene description in this makes a lot more sense if you just know that it was at home when I had her. And it was a difficult birth, partially just because it was very long. It went on, and I was really injured from it. So this was written afterwards, trying to make sense backward. It's called Arriving. The other thing to know is that in between sections, there's a little pause where I just have shift, where it is meant to either have time passing, so I'll just kind of pause. Arriving. In the kitchen, they'd gathered things: a white porcelain bowl, baking sheets for heating towels, teas with lemongrass, ginger root, red raspberry leaf. They'd run errands, watched a Spanish movie, and gone to bed before she was sure it was time. Then there were hours, open, heavy, and neither of them said anything. That long night was lit by tiny white Christmas lights tacked to the windows, warm as candles. She sat on the couch surrounded by pillows, holding her hands, then putting a hand on each knee. Open hands, open arms, open body. Please open body. She was aware of her breathing, listening to the depth of air coming in. She was sending it down to her as she waited the long wait for first air. Oh, see, can't even make it one section. Shift. Then there was her surprise at its strength. Shift. This is your body moving without you. Bring water, please. You need a hand to hold. It's hard to hear those sounds you make without embarrassment. There is sleep between the waves, and how much you wonder where your mother is now, your sisters, all asleep across the country. You are calling out to God in the most real sense. You call, and each time it comes, then a wash of warm water on your skin. Drawing hips forward to push, you have never known this place, the center of everything. Push in and down. There's nothing else. In and down. There are those sounds. You think of a lioness. She is reclined, opening her mouth wide to roar that regal, deep sound. She says, open your mouth wide, and you think, no one survives this whole. Shift. She has never been so small, so taken by her own muscles, the waves of her own body. She has never struggled so hard to surrender. Surrender, she says. Let go, but it is so. She has never been so big. These are her muscles that gather together, that send tremors. These are her bones opening, her tailbone straightening, that last tiny gate to slide through. This is her skin, stretching thin and hot. This is not a metaphor. This is one body opening to another. Shift. And her husband saw a woman bending beneath a weight he could not share. And the midwife saw a woman stunned by the strength of a body doing its job. And the woman was not there. The woman hung in the corner of the ceiling. Shift. It was not a fruit ripened, not a flower blooming. It was a little girl's head there, pink from the pressure, with dark hair swirled and stuck together by the clean water she has lived in. She is dressed in fingernails and eyebrows, the knowledge to navigate across the stomach to her mother's breast, mouth open for food. She is dressed in the red, yellow, purple of her birth, but she is here and eating, and her eyes are pressed closed, her lips wide, sealed against the pale skin. It is morning, and she's eating. And the house saw everything, but it keeps its secret well. The carpets are clean, and the kitchen counter does not say, someone leaned here on her folded arms and cried out. The couch does not say, someone was born here. Shift. They say that sometimes weeks can pass in days instead of weeks. Shift. Now, enough of this crying. It's not too hard or too heavy, this weight of a baby. Unfold into all of it, the torn skin healing, the new body deflated and vulnerable. Weak, you say to yourself, but it is not. See how you've entered a parade of women. See that you've not been stranded. I am unfolding against the blue sky and March wind, and my feet lift off the ground. I am unfolding before my red-haired daughter who cries to eat. I am unfolding my soft belly, my curved hips, and I sway in the grocery store. I sway above my husband at night. I am unfolding these nerves that extend beyond my body like great wet tentacles. I'm unfolding without fear of exposure, without false calm, opening in a place I never knew existed. A place that is teaching me not to close under this weight, not to clamp my jaw against how hard it is. See how the open hand can slide sideways through water. See how the bird opens itself to fly.
Thank you.
Really surprising. You think after 20 years of like, oh, but my baby's so big now.
Yeah, well,
so grown up.
there's that. It's also a magnificent poem. That's part of the reason why you can't ignore it. I'm in the same
Fill it all
boat.
up again.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the things that I just thought was phenomenal. Just the experience. You nailed the experience.
This was a poem I ended up writing as a part of of a literature class I was taking, and I was so grateful. David Moore was teaching that class, and it was this. I was trying to go right back to being a grad student with a tiny infant, and I asked if I could write a long poem as part of one of our projects, and he agreed. And at the time, I thought, I can't believe you let me do that. I hope I'm not trying to take it. He doesn't think I'm trying to take advantage, but I was so grateful to have the time in a project to try to just sort out.
Right.
And it fits now for me. I've spent a lot of time. I can see now, looking at some of my work and thinking how much it's present even in this book about just to me, our bodies themselves are just mysterious. And birth was my first really clear illustration of that they just do things that we can't control. And we like to believe that we can achieve perfect health, or we can achieve these athletic feats, or especially now in a time where you can hack your health and efficiency and all these things, but there's just so much that we just can't control about them. And birth is definitely one of those things. They still don't know why.
Yeah.
Why certain things work.
Yeah.
Or don't work in having babies.
Yeah.
And
one of the things I remember when our first child was born was, I mean, and we're still in that age maybe where they handed the baby to me.
Oh, right, yes.
Upon birth, know, because the father was in the room.
Yeah.
And and I'm like, it was incredibly amazing, and instinctively I knew the first thing I needed to do was to give the baby to the mother. And I watched that whole thing transpire, and it was like, you've done your job.
Yeah.
You don't even need to be here. There's a something between the baby and the mother that I couldn't understand.
Just very animal. It's just it was one body and then it's two, but it has to be.
Yeah.
It's
pretty incredible. Good poem.
Thank you for asking me to read it, because I was definitely relived experience.
The other thing, speaking of my wife, she knows you through another iteration of your life, exercise, yoga.
Yes.
You're an old yoga teacher, yoga student, and is there? You want to read that?
I'll read that poem.
And then we can move on.
Yeah, I know.
And get out of the birthing book.
It's such an interesting. It does feel like it's been almost exactly 20 years, which is always hard to get our minds around.
Right.
It feels so far away and also not. And this poem, called Going In, was a poem that I just loved so much at the time. There were so many lines that were stuck, and I couldn't get the poem to work out. I'm still not sure it works out, but I'm just gonna make them all fit in a poem. I was gonna put it in this book, and I have a number of times in life been really fascinated by the idea of just how something can seem still either when it is still or it's moving so fast that it looks still, and that sometimes we can't tell the difference. And even in ourselves, we can't tell the difference. Like, and yoga was a great example of that for me. I would come in and think like, I'm feeling so focused and energetic, and this is great. And the minute I would start to actually try to use my body, it was everywhere. I was like, I'm actually not still in any way. I'm just moving so fast that I can't tell, where anything is. So that's sort of what this is coming from. And it's also, gosh, this poem has its roots a lot further back than having written in just trying to reconcile.
There's a grounding aspect.
There's a grounding aspect, and just trying to reconcile what part of me is the part that wants to write and which part of me is the part that's writing for other people. And that's also something, I don't know if anyone ever reconciles, that's also a thing I continue to try to reconcile. It's called Going In. So long a summer night in creeping heat, a vine around her wrists. She is awake below fan rattle, below rain-wet sills and screens, and is tired of wanting in. There are no banners there in the endless parade of boots and umbrellas, only voices pulling every string, arm up, arm down, so fastened to this world. She'd rather bury it all someplace deep and senseless. Is that so strange? No one enjoys this storm. Before a window and wide, dark lawn, she finds she is tired of waiting for the same hands to offer her the same things. She who still hasn't mapped her own body is tired of the claim to know her. It's not the inside where bread steams on a sunlit table, not love or praise or welcome, not a road-wearied yes. She wants an opening that is not a door, but is seedy and rock-ridden, wood grown thin as a moth wing, so old it doesn't bang its own frame in the wind. There is no brassy knob, no way to possess its opening. She knows only that there is not some distant place. It is the irascible now of a whole life. And so it begins, quiet as a cell dividing, this question that has saddled her. She labors in its strickening, in the swell of self to reconcile. The persistent red, cape-swooped and gusted, its black map swallows the ground behind it, rides deep against her bolted dam of bones, threatens every vein and takes her air, draws and bends onto itself until its own fire edges meet, and it goes gray, retreats under a slender mask of steam. The shy green must be lured. It comes slow as a wet feathered wing, obsequious with tilted chin and furrows tiny behind her ribs, waits for her wash of breath. It sloshes in, the green deepens, goes waxy in her chest, unfurls in leafy shadows, lifts and falls in each tidal sweep, slow as hair spread on water's surface. Its comfort old as gill breathing. Beyond the window, something rubs against itself in the wind, and there is the sound of teeth grinding. She feels the echo of bone to bone in her, a song to lean into, so perfect it could be anyone's teeth, so clean the bone beyond its dressing. She reckons what she cannot see, draws in through her nose and holds, lets it drum her chest and temples, send her cheeks to flush. Just now she can touch the timbre of that sound and be done. Then out of her mouth, hard, it tumbles over itself, under the roof of her mouth, past her dry lips. Just now she is not the humid night, the weight of bones beneath her. She is surfacing in breath that braids her. She is surfacing gauzy and distilled. She draws in, still swinging, but still. That breath.
Exercise.
The exercise and trying to breathe. Trying to calm down and grinding your teeth. Well, right, they're not that far unrelated from each other. I remember writing that. People were like, why do you have to talk about teeth grinding? And I was like, I don't know, who doesn't grind their teeth? And everyone was like, we don't grind our teeth. And I was like, okay, well, I grind my teeth. And so I wrote a poem about it.
Another revelation.
Revelation, we don't all grind our teeth. I think most of us do, but who knows? I choose to believe that.
At night, the doctors say you grind your teeth at night.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Or the dentist. He said, "Do you grind your teeth at night?" And I'm, well, I don't know. I'm sleeping.
I'm asleep. I can't know. No, I do, and I wear a little thing for it.
Oh,
I remember in college, a dentist asked that. My husband was not my husband then, but happened to hear it. And I said, "They want to know if I grind my teeth at night." And he was like, "Yes, you do."
Do you want to know other things?
I know. I was like, "Don't tell me anything else." But yes, sure, I'll go get my teeth fixed. Yes. Well, gosh.
Oh, that's nice to revisit that book.
It
I
really
enjoyed
is.
it, and
I'm so grateful to have it. I think a lot about, over the years I've thought a lot about what poems in particular mean in writing life for me, because I feel like I write a lot of different kinds of things, but they're the only note that I leave from myself that I can really reread again. Like that really, feels like ultimately a pretty selfish piece of writing. You know, that maybe I just read them best, but they remind me of a thing I either wanted to write down or needed to get sorted.
Right.
You know?
But I mean, that's we kind of know in a way that some of the most selfish things you're going to do are the most universal things you'll ever write.
It's
true.
True.
because I get to experience that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My own way, my own selfish way when I read it.
Exactly. Yeah, ultimately none of us are, even at our most altruistic, is pretty selfish. Just when it's artistic, it still needs somebody else.
Well, I mean, selfish, I say selfish. We just can't help being ourselves. That's it. We have this consciousness, and God knows what happens after the lights go out. But
right.
Yeah.
But for some of us, we make a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And deal with it.
That's right, and then other people got to
So,
hold
and so you told me that you had been writing a poem a day for...
Gosh, yeah, I wish I would have looked at the actual number, what number, but yeah,
Right.
the very end of March, I decided to revisit. So a couple years ago now, a couple of friends, my friends Claire and Natalie from graduate school, we all had small kids and our lives had gotten really busy, and so we decided we just wanted a little kind of remote salon where we would promise that we would write something and it didn't have to be good. We just needed to keep the gears turning because it felt like the most like ourselves. And so we created a blog you could do, Blogger at the time, that was called the Quick Draw Salon. And with the idea of just, pulling out something and shooting it off quickly, right? Or drawing something really quickly. So we let that go a while ago. It was really great while it happened. And then this spring, I just found myself, I just felt like I was overthinking everything with writing. I really wanted to be doing a creative project. I have just finished a massive creative project, but then it was sort of in a spot where it needed to just go on the back burner for a while so I could figure it out, and I needed another thing in the in-between. And so I tried an experiment where I would just screenshot everything I wrote for 5 or 10 minutes and just try to write a poem. Just 10 minutes at the most, just make a poem and screenshot it, and then I would time-lapse it and post it. So I thought I would try to do it for a month, and then turned out to really enjoy it, and then just tried to keep doing it, to just as an experiment, to see what happens if I try to write a poem every single day. What happens in my thinking or in my writing or in my daily life experience. And it turns out a lot of things so far. I started that at the end of March, so I'm at like 281 or something poems, and first of all, I've realized there's a lot more that I write about in these when I'm just compelled to write something than I usually do in my poems. I write more about going running or a lot about being outside. I've tried actually really hard. I have not gone back to look at all of them at once. But it's interesting how many of them start, I have nowhere to begin, but I'm sitting down to type a poem, and then it takes one line usually before I'm like, oh, boom, an image, and I can go back and delete that first part. And it has just reminded me that it is, when we were talking earlier, just showing up. It's such a thing that gets repeated a million times over with anything creative, but just showing up even to promise for 10 minutes. I still catch myself in moments where I'm like, I haven't worked on my creative stuff. I've gotten too busy with work. And I say, I did write a poem this morning. Like actually write a whole poem this morning. But it has also been really unfiltered, and it's been a really practice in posting something that has typos, that is missing whole phrases, or like the verb tense is wrong. Like, so on one hand, just practicing putting out there something really pretty raw and not crafted. On the other hand, sometimes I look at them and I'm like, that's an actual poem. Yeah. Good job, you.
Right.
I have most of them no memory
One
of having
and done.
written them. Yep, a lot of them by the next day I'm like, that is what I wrote yesterday. They're just out of my head. And so, but it is funny to see, even to look back to 20 years and seeing like how many themes are similar. And these have really returned, really have gone away over the years of really domestic. A lot of my poems tend to be really situated in home or like a domestic family space. And they really return to that a lot, and a lot of being outside in these poems, which is pretty interesting.
So when you were warned that you were ruined for 10 years, you've been ruined for 20, basically.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. I know, it's a really interesting, but I do think, I can really reconcile now that a part of losing someone in my life really early was it did create a compulsion to just hold on, like capture it. And so there's a lot of repetition in that, but then when I see that it, everyday life feels really normal, and we don't notice when it changes to a different normal.
Right.
And this particular, it turned out this year is like a chunk of time when my oldest was moving out of the house and my youngest is also about to, move out. And so it also ends up being a really pivotal chunk of time to try to capture the moments when all of us are in the space at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
You're at another one of those cusps.
Yes.
Like you were when your father died.
Right.
And when you gave birth. And
Yep.
and life is kind of full of those kinds of blocks of
Yeah.
change and
Yeah.
but not so different.
No, that's the thing. What is it? The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm like, oh, hey, look, I'm still writing about being outside. My dog features more heavily in these poems than in previous poems.
So is your dog in one of these?
Sheep? Yeah, I think she is. Let's see. She is. Yes, I had one where the other day where I woke up really late, which is very uncommon. And so I just was racing. I had actually 3 minutes to work on a poem, but I was still going to try to do it. And yeah, so I can read this one because the dog features into this one. All right, this is from the 9th, from January 9th, just 2 days ago, isn't it? Yeah. The clock is the starting gun. So late. 2 hours past my morning and into the day. Don't rush, I say to myself, but I keep saying it, and it mutates. Don't rush becomes Don Trush. Who is that? He sounds like an uncle from growing up, one of those I was instructed to greet while he was watching football. The dog's walk is a run to the park and back, and she isn't even sure if she gets a treat for that. The ghost of us all awake at 1 a.m. comes back. Who are we, I wonder, broken off from sleep's web? Slung upright into walking, I'm off. That's a very scattered. I'm off. I was like, yeah.
So what was on the 10th?
Yeah, right. It was very quiet. Yeah. So the 10th is also a lot of this is also about walking the dog. This features
Same time of morning.
I walk her every morning. Yeah. From the 10th, the fog hanging across the city. So if you think about yesterday, it was like foggy and just everything froze.
It still is.
Yes. The fog hanging across the city, thick across the new snow, blends everything gray. It has frozen into the bare maple branches and onto every tiny spruce needle, like white highlight, and the frozen fog becomes something opposite of shadow, bright because it reflects the thin, milky morning. I remember the ice below the snow and move slowly. Breathing in the fog is like inhaling someone else's exhale. Immediate exchange, intimate, face to face. The canopy of frosted trees rings the field, exhales, resuscitates me.
Yeah. It was
I love that fog.
I wrote one yesterday morning too. Yeah,
That's
and it was
so awesome.
mine was
and
titled January Window.
Yeah. Oh no. That's pretty much everything was just like I thought it had snowed and it had, but it was just fog that froze.
Hoar frost.
Yeah, on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I fear, of course, when I look at all these, I'll be like, oh, wow, you were walking outside again. But I have one from like New Year's Eve, and I mean, some of these, they're just interesting. Okay. This was the New Year's Day one, so I was thinking about the night before. And we do a lot of really big family stuff for Christmas, and then New Year's Eve is off, and just the four of us, and we were playing. So the game 42 is a dominoes game, like euchre, sort of. My husband's family's from Texas, and they play a lot of 42, but we rarely play it as just play in pairs. But the four of us, the kids, my husband and I, were playing. This poem is a game of 42 at the kitchen table. It is the sound of the shuffled dominoes, the solid smack of them side by side. It's pizza and leftover birthday cake and bowls of candy meant for the gingerbread house, and music playing over the speaker loud enough to hear, but quiet enough that we can still talk about the last game we played at Christmas. This poem is the game, the gamble and risk, the hope to be rescued by a partner, and it's the four of us together in a bright kitchen on New Year's Eve. It's the fact of our laughter casting us forward, blind and happy, into the new year.
Nice.
Yeah, they're fun because they're so short.
Yeah. Do you have one for the day after? Because
I think I do. The second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they got out of order. Oh yeah. It's another. It's like kid ones. This poem is watching the three. So I got into this where I just was like, this poem is, which was interesting to sort of expand how I was thinking about the tension that we expect in a poem, but the tensions that live in the experiences too. Maybe, who knows if it works. But this poem is watching the 3 teenage boys load their skis into the van in the morning dark, jogging back into the house on icy sidewalks, then out again. It's the solid thump of doors closing, and it's me standing at the threshold, holding my coffee, looking out at them. This poem is the way they aren't afraid of the road over the pass and haven't even thought about how cold it might be. As I watch, I see some silent joke unfold inside the lit car, and all of them tip their chins up in hysterical laughter. They're crying with joy as they pull out onto the street and drive off into the dark.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was terrified. I hate that. I hate those passes for teenagers, no matter how good of drivers they are.
Yeah,
But,
well, yeah, it's risk.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're way more daily than I don't usually write about my kids in that way. I don't really try to, it doesn't feel poem-worthy to write about, like, I don't know, standing and watching someone drive away in a car. It was really, the working on these has really challenged in my mind what I had sort of accidentally judged as relevant for a poem.
Well, and it's somewhat reminiscent of the Eastern sort of approach, you know, the
Just
Chinese
do.
or the Zen kind of poets that just kind of chronicle the day and what's going on and
Yep,
the simple act of existence.
yep, this was
Yeah.
the thing on this day. Yeah.
I remember Greg Keeler saying that he was like getting bored with himself.
Yeah. Oh,
and saying the
yes.
same stuff over and over
I
again
definitely have those
as a
from,
free
like-
verse poet, and decided
Yeah.
that, well, maybe I'll just write a sonnet a day.
Right?
And then,
Yes.
so then these things just started building, and he was up to like 600 and some after a few years. He's
Yeah.
still doing it, I think.
It's just a retraining. It's interesting. The manuscript I was working on right before this, I mean, this was sort of in counterbalance to that book, which was so tight. Like, I had been working on it for so long that it was just like tightening the threads throughout, to the point where I think that has gone too far probably in that manuscript, but I was just I needed it something to just like sprawl out again and not be so considered and so tight and so weighty, because definitely my default, I know even my most reliable readers will be like, you're strangling it to death.
So is
Put it
this
aside.
is prose? The
It is
new-
prose,
yeah.
yeah, it is prose. It's a memoir. It is a memoir in chunks. That's like layered, and so there's just so much piecing together, and so it was like, well, I can still write about life. I can still write about daily stuff, but it just has to change gears.
Right.
But and unlike, I mean, even some of the ones, to me, it's really obvious. Like, these are so much looser. Some of them are so much more. They just sound like someone saying, "Here's a thing that happened today,"
Right.
versus poems that it really does highlight the craft of poems that are just so much more. Like, all the threads are just kind of pulled in, and everything is drawn in. So much
Yeah,
more crisply.
the year that this book, the How to Remember the World,
Yeah.
came out, was it the
It
same
was
year?
almost the same year
As Radio
as
Bloom?
Radio Bloom. They
Okay.
were at the exact same time, but I think Radio Bloom came out. Actually, Radio Bloom came out first, and
Okay.
then the poems did, and they were just. That was. I'm not
And-
even sure why. I think it was production schedules, because they were many years apart, but then they arrived at the same time.
So, what arrived first for
Radio
you?
Bloom.
Radio Bloom.
Oh, gosh, poems from How to Remember the World, some of them were written right around the same time as Bread and Water Body.
Oh,
They
okay.
spanned, like,
Right,
some of the
right.
stuff from How to Remember the World spanned 20 years of writing.
Right.
And Radio Bloom was one really tight chunk of composition that took a long time to revise.
Well, do you want to share something from either one of those two books? I mean, an example of what you just said, maybe?
Maybe I'll choose something from How to Remember the World, because these have such a similar hominess. Like, in this book, they're like there are poems that just have addresses
Right.
as locations, because it was just hominess isn't the right word, but just like like location, home location.
And one of the poems, you mentioned Natalie earlier, and Natalie is one of the poems in here, and it's kind of like a letter poem, right?
Yes, it is a letter poem. It's in that one, yeah. I think it's in this one. I think I just saw it.
Oh, okay.
We did a writing retreat together, and yes, this was which.
Oh, okay.
I'll hold off on with this one, but yes, and there's one to my sister in here too. My other sister. I have 3 sisters. This one's to Sarah. I think I owe Anna a poem, apparently. I haven't written her a poem. This book, though, also gets so much into just physical health and physical health experiences, which are really hard, I've noticed, in daily things, even when I'm experiencing something that it's hard for me to figure out how to write about illness. In the moment without putting it in some structure, and that was a big thing that ended up in this book, was just trying to really figure out how to talk about illness. And maybe I'll read. This is not about illness, even though I just said that, but this is one of my favorite poems that I rarely read.
Yeah.
And I think it's as much talking about what we were just saying about trying to capture things in words, and how it lets us believe, or for me, like it makes me feel like I've made something, even though really at the same time I also know that something is just air,
Right.
really. So this one is called Tables and Chairs. The loose hammer of laughter swings between us, and I think we are building nothing. Fluttering talk like birds that cannot land. Affection and the way we are supposed to charm each other. Come closer. I will tell you everything. Conversation is an act of faith. The carpenter holds the wood firm below the saw's spinning edge, blade into wood and then wood chips and sawdust so fine there is nothing untouched by the building. We are covered in something we cannot remove. The fine dust burrows and becomes us. I want the faith of the carpenter whose hands measure and cut to make solid things, square things one can live in. You believe in words the way you believe in tables and chairs, the strength of walls and the symbols of door, of threshold, of window. But even the bird's bones are hollow. The bird an invisible print, a gesture of offer, welcoming the step across, the unbutton or peel back, the getting through. The bird a horse braying, a breath, a bone house built small with one red stripe. Place yes and no in a drawer, close it, walk away and feel clean. Every word is permanent twilight, is permanent pre-dawn. Each blurry, determined arrow falls, blunt-edged from its target. In a shiver of leaves and wings, grounded birds rise and scatter. The bird without pain of departure, left for dead, unseasoned or skinny. The bird a mania, a black axis. This table rocks on its own ill legs. When I am least ready, it shifts. I am the least ready. I shift. The bird an orchid, wind-broken, open, the bird a buoyant thistle. I breathe in the curled filings of conversation. I cough the tiny feet of made things. I've always, it is so interesting to look back across. Like, what would my now time self say to this in a workshop? Why do we have to talk about birds in this poem?
Well,
can't you just talk about
I'll tell you why. Because I read, I think, in your acknowledgments or whatever, that one of your friends told you never forget birds and trees, or something like that.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
And I thought, oh, there's the birds. Birds
arrived.
just showed up.
It's so funny. Yeah, it's reminding me how long it's been since I've really reread some of these poems. But I did want to open, because I was talking about the health stuff, I had worked for a long time in trying to figure out writing about my dad's health and my dad's loss. But in this, I was writing a lot about some of the things trying to write about my physical health experiences, which had been a part for me where I was like, I would rather talk about things like breathing and things that feel good instead of trying to revisit and capture some of the things that feel less good. So I will read, I think I'll just read Dear Heart. So this is about arrhythmia. I called it For the Arrhythmic. But the sensation I know maybe people have felt just even from panic, that just feels like so dramatic in your chest. So this is literally written to my heart. Dear heart, and when I say this, dear heart, I do not mean to conjure a deer's heart, pumping hopeless and wild around the puncture of a hunter's arrow. Nor do I mean dear heart as in sweetie pie, honey, or my love. What I mean to do is address you, my heart, the incorrigible fish thrashing against my ribs. You, the thick-valved compass guiding me from the womb, since before I had hands or hair or lips. You, the fat red clock rocking me across the hot tarmac of life, saying, no, walk away, or always forgive, or yes, love him, and often do it if you must, but it will crush me. So far you have freighted me onward, lurching forward and falling back like the town drunk trying to find comfort because, my dear, I have been unkind to you, cracking you open with life's hammers. Is it too late to say I love you, to say that I study and follow your steady directives, to say that I pray to you like a thing I have already lost?
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about a thing you can't control.
The fragility
well.
of life, your body.
Yeah.
My wife mentioned to me that she had someone come through her line at the store, like yesterday, I guess, and somebody she hadn't seen in a while, in their 60s, early mid-60s, who said that she asked her, how she was doing or whatever, and she said, well, she'd lost her husband, and Pam was like, oh, I didn't know that there was, and she said, none of us did. She came home from like the store, and he was in the recliner. It just didn't, whatever.
Yep, that's pretty.
Yeah, the heart.
Yes,
that
that's exactly pretty much. Yeah, it's
decided to
just
check out.
we don't completely. I mean, there are always there are all kinds of ways. Like I was saying before, like, oh, you can calm your heart rate, you can do all kinds of things, but like, it still sort of remains in the dark. All of it.
Yeah.
But I really only understood like how much this was an issue actually from yoga, because I'd been told by doctors for years, like, I was just stressed. Oh, it's just anxiety. You're just stressed. It's fine. But I could really tell, because in that yoga practice, you understand, you're really intense activity, and then it's really quiet. And I would look around. I was like, I'm sure, like, how can you not see this? Like, I felt like it was so visible, and I knew that wasn't, by then I knew that wasn't what was supposed to be happening. It was supposed to be calming down. And so, that was when I actually went in. I was like, I know this isn't right now. I could tell.
Check it out.
Tell me what's going on. But this book became a number of those things, of trying to just talk a little bit about illness and loss directly.
There's a great poem in there about your dad, and it was a dream or just a memory of mopping the floor or whatever.
Yes. Oh, I forgot I put that one in here. Yes, where is that one? I didn't even remember I put that same poem in this one. Where is
I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head.
know,
I had it marked at my book at home that I left at home.
Forgot. It was something about. I know. That was probably the most recent poem in this, and that kind of got pushed in with it. Yeah, I pulled some of these poems from. Oh, come on. Where is that? There, The Vault, the Birds. It's more about birds.
Good.
Yeah. This one, and then the other one I was thinking of too, and this is around the same time that I wrote this. Also, my husband's father died, and so it ended up being kind of like a layering of thinking about both of those losses. But this was actually, so I wrote this poem as an activity. I was working with a writing group at Tamarack Grief Center, writing about grief.
Right.
And so this actually wrote with the group, and then tinkered with a bit more. It's called The Vault, the Birds. So this is trying to gather back a memory of being 12 or so when my dad was sick.
Right.
Sorry, last thing is just thinking about, from this age, trying to reconstruct which pieces of the memory could have been accurate that was a part of this. It's like, how do I even know that at this point? How can I?
Right, memory.
Right, yeah, memory. Well, it doesn't make any sense, right? I was mopping because I'd been asked to mop. I know it was a Saturday in 1989, and it was spring or summer. I know this because most of the time we spent together was in the evenings, and this particular day was sunny. And Saturdays were always our days. And I know that it was spring or summer, but because before and after that, you were too sick to have been standing there watching me. It was 1989 for sure, because by September you were dead. I know that we were alone because we were never alone, and the fact of our aloneness, read not togetherness, made the house feel too big and too open and too quiet, as though all the conversations we hadn't ever said aloud had swarmed back, crowding the room like dark birds at the windows, waiting to dive through the tiniest opening. Or maybe it was the words you couldn't find that made the air turn thick, made my throat tight. I don't know. But the bright, silent kitchen was a vault in which I cleaned. I mopped the light linoleum in a fever. I knew you were watching me while I worked, and I knew right then that you believed you were going to die. I knew but didn't want to know that that moment, me slopping a wet mop across the floor in the kitchen, was a moment you were filing away. I could feel you trying to see everything, to gather every small crumb into a monument of normalcy. I could feel you beginning to cry behind me, and so I couldn't turn around because I was supposed to keep going, because you were hoping to hold on to it, to carry this terribly common thing across space and time. And my job was to say, look, I know how to do these things, so it's all going to be fine. I knew that you were trying to see me as the girl I was then, but you were also trying to see into the teenager, the college student, the mother, the wife, the so many people I would become without you. But I never looked because I didn't want to hold your silence. I didn't want to feel like I was doing it all wrong. I didn't want to see into the hours of my life I would give to cleaning floors and wiping counters. I didn't want to imagine the lifetime I would spend trying again and again to clear some room, to make things nice, to make some space to live in.
Good job. Trying to recreate the past.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
and make it relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good. And unfortunately, I think we're about out of time.
That's great. I know. It just
it's
flies
like, do we do
past.
round two?
I know. No, it just flies past.
We didn't even get to Radio Bloom.
Oh, yeah. Radio Bloom's its own beast. It sort of requires
its own palette.
Longer, yes, discussion and reading. It's kind of its own animal. It's
Well, maybe another time.
That would be
It
great.
was a pleasure.
This was so. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the chance to.
Oh, we're grateful that you shared
all those
your
things.
work with us. So,
Yeah.
Amy Ratto Parks, thank you. We'll be
you.
back again next week for another version of A Poet in Montana.
Got a lot